Did you know that you can zoom in as well as rotate around your viewport incrementally inside of Blender? But did you also know that you have to be careful with this one setting to make sure everything goes right? Let's jump in. Okay, so you're inside of Blender, and most people want to model and just navigate inside of Blender inside of perspective mode. I have heard of people modeling in orthographic mode. If you're not sure, the biggest difference is that with perspective, things in the distance tend to get smaller. It's very similar to how it works with real life, which is why it's perspective. It's from your perspective. Orthographic is things in the distance don't change at all. You can go and you can find that by going up to the view bar and pressing perspective orthographic, or pressing Numpad 5 on your keyboard. And so as you can see, let's go back into our scene here. As you can see here, the lines in the distance, they look bigger, but they are the same exact size here. So there's no changes in that sense. And so some people do prefer to model this way, but I think the majority of people prefer to model in perspective mode because it's true in keeping with what our eyes actually see. So, but sometimes you want to have a straight on view, right? You don't want to kind of be looking at it, you're seeing a little bit of every axis here. So you want to constrain it to a particular axis, and you can do Numpad 1, 3, 7 for those various things. And so when you press 1, you're going to get the negative Y perspective here. When you press 3, you're going to get the frontal perspective. And you press 7, you're going to get the Z perspective. You can also do these things by just toggling the gizmo here. Also too, if you're trying to look from, say you're looking at it from the negative perspective and you want to look at it from the positive perspective, you can hit the gizmo here. Or you can also press Control and then that numpad number to go back to it. And then you would just press the numpad number to go back to the original one. So you all know that, right? Let's say you're in, you've done your work inside of orthographic mode, and now you're going to, you want to press the middle mouse button so you can get out of that. And guess what? You're back into perspective mode. The reason why this happens, why doesn't it stay in orthographic mode? For example, if you're looking down at your objects like this is an orthographic perspective. And this makes modeling a lot easier for certain instances. And when you go back though, you're right into perspective mode. The reason for this is because of the setting up here. If you go to, and then let me make sure to turn on, make sure you can see this. If you go to your settings here and you edit preferences and you go to your settings and then you go down the navigation, you see this part right here where it says orbit and pan. Underneath it, you'll see this word auto, which means automatic. And so then you see perspective. So in other words, what it's telling Blender is, hey, there are certain movements or certain actions within Blender that if you do, I want you to change it from that orthographic mode into the perspective mode. And I want you to do it automatically. I don't want to have to press Numpad 5, which is the shortcut, as well as going to view and then you can go to view and then choosing perspective or orthographic. But I don't want you to, I don't want to have to, to do all that. I want you to do it automatically. Well, this is really nice, for most times, like if you wanted to go orthographic here and then middle mouse button and then you're out of it and back in perspective, that's really nice. And that's the way a lot of people want to operate. And one of the things I wanted to show you in this tutorial is no matter what perspective you're in, you can always rotate your screen by 15 degrees. So by pressing, let's just say you press 2, you rotate it along the Y-axis, right? And then the opposite of that is if you press 8, and then you're going to go the opposite direction. So the same thing can happen, and this is happening in 15-minute or 15-degree increments. The same thing can happen if you go with the 4 and 6. So the 4 is going to rotate you along the Z-axis, so you can kind of get a 15-degree rotation, as well as the 6 that's going to go the opposite direction. So those are really nice. Zooming in and out, you can do the negative to zoom out, and then the positive to zoom in slightly. But something to keep in mind here is, let's just say you're working in perspective mode, and then all of a sudden you look at it from an orthographic mode, right? So here's the orthographic, and you can see it right on. And let's just say you do some rotation. So I want to rotate around the Z-axis here. Well, guess what? Now all of a sudden, if you go out of doing that, now you're in orthographic mode. Why? It's because the rotation, when you do the rotation using the Numpad, 2, 8, 4, and 6, when you're doing that, it keeps the orientation view that you're in. So as soon as you put it in orthographic mode and then you do any rotating, it's going to stay in orthographic mode. It's not going to switch like that. So in other words, like the auto function over here doesn't, within our settings, it doesn't really apply to the incremental rotations and incremental zooming and so forth. It's going to keep whatever you put it on. So if we do this, and then let's just say we do this is in perspective mode, and say we do some rotation, well, it's going to stay in perspective mode. But as soon as I click this gizmo or click one of my Numpad shortcuts, so say for example we'll do the 3 here for front facing situation along the x-axis, well, now if I were to do the rotation again, now I'm still going to stay in orthographic mode, and the auto function within the perspective inside the settings is not going to apply there. I hope this little tutorial was helpful. If you found it helpful, would you be so kind to press that subscribe button and please like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.